Jack Miller looked out of the large viewing window of Proxima Station. The blue-red light of Proxima Centauri played across his tired face. At 52 years old, Jack had never imagined he would be the first human to represent Earth at the Galactic Council. Back home, he had been a simple agricultural scientist working on drought-resistant crops. Now he was here, 4 light years from Earth, surrounded by beings from 100 different worlds. The space station hung in orbit around Proxima Centauri b, the rocky planet that was the closest exoplanet to Earth. The station itself was a marvel of alien engineering, a spinning wheel of metal and strange materials that Jack still couldn't name even after 6 months on board. "Representative Miller, your presence is requested in Chamber 3, said a soft voice from the speaker on his wrist communicator. The voice belonged to Zell, an artificial intelligence that ran most of the station's day-to-day operations. Jack sighed and straightened his blue diplomat uniform. Earth's first official uniform for galactic diplomacy had been designed by committee, and it showed. The stiff collar always dug into his neck, and the material never seemed to fit right across his shoulders. "On my way, Zell," he replied. The hallways of Proxima Station curved gently upward, following the rotation of the Great Wheel. Jack passed several alien beings on his way to Chamber 3. A tall, thin Lurian nodded politely, their 4 eyes blinking in sequence. A pair of Drell merchants moved aside, their scaly skin shimmering under the lights. Jack returned each greeting with the careful respect he had been trained to show. Earth had only been aware of the Galactic Council for 15 years. First contact had been made when a Council survey ship detected Earth's early quantum communication experiments. The Council had millions of years of history and thousands of member species. Humans were brand new to the galactic community, untested, unproven, and given only provisional species status. Jack entered Chamber 3, a medium-sized meeting room with a round table. 5 representatives were already seated. Jack recognized them all. Ambassador Kretal of the Vraxis Empire, a large reptilian being with ridge-like scales and small, intense eyes. Representative Noor of the Pelian Cooperative, who looked almost human except for her silver skin and lack of external ears. Director Vushzan of the Commerce Guild, a being made of what appeared to be living crystal, and 2 others from Minor, species whose names Jack always struggled to pronounce. "Representative Miller," said Kretal, his voice a low rumble, "you are nearly late." "My apologies, Ambassador," Jack said with a small bow, the proper greeting for a Vraxis of Kretal's rank. "I was reviewing the agricultural trade proposals." Jack took his seat, painfully aware that his chair was slightly lower than the others. As a representative of a provisional species, he was not considered a full equal. Small reminders of this fact were built into every aspect of station life. "We will begin with the matter of trade routes through the Sol system," announced Director Vushzan, light flickering through his crystalline form. "The Commerce Guild proposes an increase in heavy transport traffic through your system's outer regions." Jack called up the relevant data on his tablet. "I'm concerned about the proposed route, Director. It passes very close to several of our research outposts in the Kuiper Belt." "The route has been calculated for maximum efficiency," Vushzan replied, his tone dismissive. "Efficiency isn't my only concern," Jack said. "The data also shows a significant increase in Vraxis military vessels accompanying these transports." The room went suddenly quiet. Kretal's scales darkened, a sign that Jack had learned meant anger or offense. "Are you suggesting," Kretal said slowly, "that the Vraxis Empire is violating the neutral zone agreements?" Jack looked at his data again. "I'm only pointing out what the numbers show, Ambassador. Military escorts have increased by 300% in the last standard cycle. This is outrageous." Kretal stood up suddenly. "A provisional species dares to question the honor of the Vraxis Empire?" Jack raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Ambassador, I'm simply trying to understand." "You understand nothing." Kretal reached for the ceremonial staff that all Vraxis diplomats carried. "Your species is barely out of its planetary cradle, yet you speak as if you have the right to question your betters." Representative Noor stood as well. "Ambassador Kretal, please remain calm. I'm sure Representative Miller meant no offense." "I meant no offense," Jack agreed quickly. I'm just doing my job. Earth is concerned about increased military presence so close to our home system. Kretal's scales were now almost black with rage. Your concerns are meaningless. The Vraxis Empire goes where it wishes. The Vraxis ambassador took a step toward Jack, the ceremonial staff gripped tightly in his clawed hand. Jack stood his ground, though his heart was racing. He knew that showing fear to a Vraxis was considered a grave insult. Ambassador, Jack said firmly, threats will not resolve this issue. I propose we examine the data together and… Kretal roared, a sound that made the walls of Chamber 3 vibrate. In a single fluid motion, the ambassador swung his ceremonial staff. It was meant as a dominance display, a show of strength common in Vraxis culture. What Kretal didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the metal alloy of the staff created a unique resonance with human brain tissue. A light blow that would merely stun a Vraxis was deadly to a human. The staff struck Jack on the side of his head. There was a brief flash of pain, then nothing. Jack Miller fell to the floor of Chamber 3. His tablet clattered beside him, still displaying the trade route data he had been so concerned about. Blood began to pool beneath his head. What is this? Kretal demanded, confused by Jack's lack of response. In Vraxis culture, the struck party would acknowledge the dominance display, and negotiations would continue. Representative Noor rushed to Jack's side, her silver fingers searching for a pulse in his neck. She looked up at the others, her eyes wide. He's dead, she whispered. The chamber erupted in chaos. The minor representatives backed away in horror. Director Vushzan began rapidly communicating through his personal device, no doubt contacting his superiors. Kretal stared at Jack's body, his scales now fading to a pale gray of shock. Impossible, he said. The contact was minimal. Human physiology is different, Noor said, her voice trembling. They are more fragile than Vraxis. Security personnel flooded into the chamber. The station's alert system began to sound, a low, pulsing tone that echoed through every corridor. Within an hour, everything had changed. Jack Miller, Earth's first representative to the Galactic Council, was dead. His body was carefully placed in a stasis field to preserve it for return to Earth. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The death of a diplomatic representative, even one from a provisional species, was an extremely serious matter. The Council dispatched its fastest vessel to Earth, carrying Jack's body and an official message of regret. The vessel also carried an offer of reparations according to standard Council protocols, typically resources or technology, equivalent to the economic value of the deceased. The Council expected this matter to be resolved quickly. One human diplomat had died in an unfortunate incident. Appropriate compensation would be provided. The matter would be closed. They had no way of knowing what was about to happen. The sleek Galactic Council vessel entered Earth orbit 17 days after Jack Miller's death. It was smaller than most humans expected, only about the size of a commercial airplane, but its hull shimmered with technology far beyond Earth's understanding. The landing site chosen was a large field near the United Nations headquarters in New York. World leaders, military personnel, and thousands of citizens gathered behind barriers to watch the alien ship touch down. News cameras broadcast the event to billions of people across the planet. President Samantha Wright stood at the front of the reception committee. At 48, she had never expected to be the leader who would handle first contact with alien diplomats on Earth soil. She wore a simple black suit out of respect for the occasion. "Madam President, they're opening the main hatch," said General Frank Lawson, who stood beside her. A ramp extended from the ship and 3 figures walked down. 2 were clearly security, large beings in fitted armor that moved with silent grace. Between them walked a small, delicate creature with pale blue skin and 4 arms. This was High Counselor Tiva, sent personally by the Galactic Council to handle this sensitive matter. "President Wright," said Tiva in perfect English, "I bring the formal condolences of the Galactic Council for the unfortunate loss of Representative Miller." "We appreciate your presence, High Counselor," President Wright replied. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her well could detect the controlled anger beneath her words. The formal reception moved inside the United Nations building. There, in a solemn ceremony, Jack Miller's body was returned to Earth in a stasis pod that had preserved him perfectly. Jack's wife, Mary, and their 2 adult children watched with tear-streaked faces as the pod was transferred to human authorities. The Miller family had become the unexpected face of humanity to the galaxy, their grief broadcast on every screen across Earth. After the ceremony, President Wright led High Counselor Teva and a small group of human officials to a private meeting room. The tension in the air was thick as they took their seats. "The Galactic Council deeply regrets this incident," Teva began. "Ambassador Kretal has been recalled from his position and will face disciplinary action according to Vraxis law. And what does that mean exactly?" asked Dr. Alan Parker, head of Earth's Exopolitical Relations Department. He was a tall man with gray hair and piercing eyes that had earned him the nickname, the Human Lie Detector, during his previous career in international diplomacy. Teva's 4 hands made a gesture that translated roughly to embarrassment. "The ambassador will be removed from diplomatic service. However, I must explain that under Vraxis culture, the action was not considered an attack, but a dominance display. The fatal outcome was not intended. Intent doesn't bring Jack Miller back to his family," said President Wright. "We understand," said Teva. "That is why we have prepared this." One of Teva's assistants placed a small cube on the table. It projected a holographic document into the air between them. "This is our formal offer of reparations," Teva explained. "The Council has calculated the economic value of Representative Miller based on standard metrics: his remaining work years, his specialized knowledge, his reproductive contribution to your species, and we offer equivalent compensation." "Listio." Room went completely silent. President Wright's knuckles turned white as she gripped the edge of the table. "You've placed a price on his life?" she asked quietly. Teva seemed confused by the reaction. "This is standard Council protocol. We offer the choice of advanced medical technology, rare resource rights, or information access as compensation." "Dr." Parker leaned forward. "High Counselor, I don't think you understand human values. We don't measure the worth of a life in economic terms." "Then how do you calculate appropriate reparations?" Teva asked, genuinely puzzled. "We don't," said President Wright. "Because we don't believe you can replace a human life with things." The meeting ended shortly after, with Earth officials promising to consider the Council's offer and respond formally within 7 days. What followed was the most united period in human history. For perhaps the first time, almost every nation on Earth worked together toward a common goal. Emergency sessions of the United Nations ran day and night. Military leaders, diplomats, scientists, and ethicists all contributed to the discussion of how humanity should respond. "We have to be realistic," General Lawson argued during one heated session. "Their technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. We can't threaten them militarily." "But we can't just accept their version of justice either," countered Representative Sofia Diaz from Mexico. "They need to understand that humans don't see this as a simple accident with a price tag attached." Dr. Parker had been unusually quiet during most of the debates. When he finally spoke, the room fell silent to listen. "We're thinking about this all wrong," he said. "We're focused on what we can't do. We can't fight them. We can't match their technology. We can't bring Jack back. Let's focus on what we can do." He stood and walked to the center of the chamber. "What if we sent not one but hundreds of representatives to replace Jack? Not as a threat, but as a presence. A reminder, a message that we don't value human life the way they calculate it." The idea spread like wildfire. Within days, a plan took shape that no one in the Galactic Council could have predicted. 7 days after the return of Jack Miller's body, President Wright met again with High Counselor Teva. "We have prepared our formal response," the President said, handing over a document written in both English and the common language of the Galactic Council. Teva read it, all 4 of her eyes widening in surprise. "This is unexpected." The response had 3 parts. First, Earth formally rejected the Council's reparation offer, stating that no material compensation could address the true nature of the offense. Second, they demanded a complete restructuring, of how provisional species were integrated into galactic affairs, including safety protocols specifically designed for physiologically vulnerable species. Third, and most surprisingly, they announced they would be sending not 1, but 500 human diplomats to replace Jack, each instructed to take positions throughout council space. 500 representatives, Tiva said, her voice rising slightly. The council has never permitted a provisional species such extensive presence. We're not asking permission, said President Wright calmly. We're informing you of our decision. Earth is unified on this matter. The logistics alone would be impossible, Tiva protested. Housing, translation services, security. We've already begun preparations, Dr. Parker interrupted. We'll provide our own translators and handle our own logistics. All we require is that the council recognize our representatives with the same diplomatic status Jack Miller held. Tiva looked from one human face to another, searching for signs of bluff or deception. She found none. The council will need to discuss this unprecedented request, she said finally. It's not a request, President Wright corrected her. The first group of 100 representatives will be ready to depart in 30 days. We trust the council will make the necessary arrangements. As Tiva departed Earth later that day, she sent an urgent message back to council headquarters. Something unexpected was happening on this small blue planet. These humans did not respond like any provisional species the council had ever encountered. The galaxy was about to learn just how different humans could be. The training facility outside Denver, Colorado buzzed with activity. 3 months after Jack Miller's death, Earth was preparing to launch what the media had nicknamed Miller's Heirs, 500 volunteers who would represent humanity throughout council space. Susan Blake adjusted her new uniform. At 34, she had never imagined leaving her kindergarten classroom in Nebraska to become an interstellar diplomat. Yet here she was, along with people from every nation, ethnicity, and background on Earth. Nervous? Asked Greg Washington, a retired construction worker from Detroit who had become her friend during training. Terrified, Susan admitted. I still don't understand why they selected me. Because you're exactly what we need, said Dr. Alan Parker, approaching their conversation. The council expects diplomats who think like them. We're sending people who think like humans. Dr. Parker had become the driving force behind the entire operation. He walked through the facility daily, speaking with each group of volunteers. Remember, he told them, you're not going out there to fight or to threaten. You're going to observe, connect, and communicate. Your most powerful weapon is your humanity. What made the plan truly revolutionary was that these weren't career diplomats or military personnel. They were teachers, engineers, artists, doctors, and ordinary citizens who volunteered to represent Earth. Their backgrounds and perspectives were as diverse as humanity itself. The Galactic Council had eventually, reluctantly, agreed to accept human representatives but had tried to limit their placement to minor outposts and less significant positions. Earth had pushed back, insisting on placing humans in every level of galactic society. Nancy Rodriguez, a chef from Miami, had specifically requested placement on a Vraxis military vessel, the very species responsible for Jack's death. When questioned about this choice, she simply said, "They need to see us as people, not statistics, and I need to see them the same way." The first departure ceremony was broadcast worldwide. 100 volunteers boarded council transport ships, watched by billions of their fellow humans. President Wright gave a speech that was both solemn and hopeful. You carry with you not just the memory of Jack Miller, but the spirit of all humanity. Show the galaxy who we truly are. As the ships rose into the sky, humanity held its collective breath. No one knew if the plan would work. Many feared they were sending hundreds more to their deaths. 6 months after Jack Miller's death, human representatives had spread across council space. They were stationed on diplomatic outposts, trade hubs, science vessels, and administrative centers. Each carried a small patch on their uniform shoulder, a blue and green Earth symbol with a single star representing Jack Miller. The council species watched in confusion as humans integrated themselves throughout galactic society. These humans weren't behaving as expected. They didn't form tight groups of their own kind. They didn't follow predictable patterns or defer to higher-ranking species. Instead, they displayed something that confused and sometimes alarmed council officials: genuine curiosity. On the Central Archives Station, Will Cooper, a librarian from Chicago, spent his free time exploring the vast digital records of galactic history. When he discovered that much of the historical data was organized in ways that made it difficult for new species to access, he developed a simple translation algorithm to make the knowledge more accessible. "Why would you do this?" asked the Pelian administrator. "This information gives established species advantage in negotiations." Will looked confused. Knowledge shouldn't be hoarded. It should be shared. The idea was so foreign to the Pelian that she reported it as suspicious behavior to her superiors. Similar reports began coming in from across council space. Humans were asking questions that no one had thought to ask in millennia. They were pointing out inefficiencies in systems so ancient that they had become invisible to those who created them. On a mining colony in the Orion Spur, Greg Washington noticed that the living quarters assigned to the lowest status worker species were built with toxic materials that were slowly poisoning the inhabitants. "This has been standard practice for generations," explained the colony manager. "These species have shorter lifespans anyway." Greg refused to accept this explanation. He organized the workers, used his construction knowledge to identify safer alternatives, and filed formal complaints up the council hierarchy. When he was ignored, he began sending reports to other human representatives who raised the issue in their own postings. Within weeks, a coordinated pressure campaign forced the council to address the situation. The mining colony was required to improve worker housing, setting a precedent that rippled through similar operations across council space. On the Galactic Hub Administrative Center, Susan Blake found herself assigned to a minor clerical position. Rather than complain, she embraced it, making friends with species of all ranks. Her genuine interest in their lives and cultures caught many off guard. One day, she overheard two high-ranking officials discussing a territorial dispute that threatened to escalate into violence between two powerful species. "Excuse me," Susan interrupted, breaking several council protocols by speaking without being addressed first. "Have you considered looking at this from the perspective of the smaller species caught between them?" The officials were startled, then curious. Susan explained how her experience mediating playground disputes between 5-year-olds might offer insight. Surprisingly, they listened. The framework she suggested, focusing on shared needs rather than competing claims, helped defuse the immediate tension. Word spread. Soon Susan was being quietly consulted on other disputes, her human perspective valued precisely because it was different. Nancy Rodriguez, assigned to the Vraxis vessel Victory Claw, faced the most difficult position of all. The Vraxis crew initially treated her with open hostility, seeing her presence as an insult to their honor. Nancy responded by learning to cook Vraxis cuisine. She studied their dietary needs and cultural food traditions, spending hours in the ship's galley creating dishes that honored their customs while introducing subtle Earth variations. Slowly, meals became a bridge. Curious Vraxis officers began asking about Earth food customs. Nancy explained how on Earth, sharing food was a way to build community across differences. This concept was new to the Vraxis, whose meals were traditionally consumed according to strict hierarchical rules. The most significant development across council space was how humans communicated with each other. The council had expected humans to operate like other species, hierarchically, with information flowing up to central authority before being distributed back down. Instead, humans shared information directly, creating informal networks that spanned vast distances. A discovery made by one human representative would be known to all within days, without passing through official channels. This behavior alarmed council leadership. It wasn't just the free flow of information that concerned them. It was how humans adapted collectively without centralized direction. They collaborated across vast distances, responding to challenges with a unified approach that emerged organically rather than through command. "They function like a networked intelligence," reported one council analyst. "It's as if they're all parts of a single entity, yet each maintains individual initiative. The Council had never encountered such a species before. They had allowed 500 humans into their midst, expecting them to be isolated, ineffective observers. Instead, they found themselves hosting something new and potentially disruptive, a presence that asked uncomfortable questions and saw connections that had been overlooked for millennia. What the Council failed to realize was that humanity was just getting started. 1 year after Jack Miller's death, the Galactic Council called an extraordinary session. This rare event brought together representatives from all major species to discuss matters of highest importance. The topic that prompted this session surprised many: humanity. The grand chamber of the Council Central Station was designed to impress. Massive pillars reached up to a ceiling that displayed a real-time holographic map of the galaxy. Thousands of delegates filled the tiered seating arranged by species rank and influence. Earth, as a provisional member, was allocated a small section, near the back. High Counselor Tiva presided from the central platform. This session will address the unprecedented situation regarding the human presence in council space, she announced, her forearms making formal gestures of gravity. Delegate Zorn of the Vraxis Empire rose to speak first. His scales were the deep blue of diplomatic rank, and he carried a ceremonial staff similar to the one that had killed Jack Miller, though this one had been modified with a safety covering. The humans have violated the spirit of our agreement, Zorn declared. We permitted them representatives, not infiltrators. They are disrupting established systems across our territories. Examples were presented. Human representatives had exposed unfair trade practices on 17 worlds, identified safety violations on council vessels, and questioned resource allocation that had gone unchallenged for centuries. Most concerning, continued a crystalline delegate from the Commerce Guild, they share information outside proper channels. They build alliances across species boundaries without regard for rank or tradition. The complaints continued for hours. Human representatives sat quietly, listening without visible reaction, a discipline they had learned during their training. Their silence made many delegates nervous. Karen Foster, a former logistics manager stationed on a fuel processing hub in the Cygnus arm, made careful notes. 6 months earlier, she had discovered that 63% of military vessel routes depended on a scheduling algorithm with several critical weaknesses. She had quietly shared this information with other human representatives who had mapped out similar vulnerabilities throughout council systems. Bill Johnson, a programmer working in a communication relay station, had done the same with his discovery of backdoor access to emergency broadcast systems spanning 3 sectors. Neither of them had revealed these findings to council authorities. The humans were building knowledge, not making threats. As the session neared its conclusion, a message arrived that caused a stir among council leadership. A holographic projection appeared at the center of the chamber, showing President Samantha Wright of Earth. Honorable delegates of the Galactic Council, she began, her image looking steadily at the assembled representatives. I address you on the 1-year anniversary of the death of Jack Miller, Earth's first diplomat to your assembly. There was confused murmuring throughout the chamber. This direct address from a planetary leader was highly irregular. For the past year, Wright continued, 500 of our people have been learning your ways, making connections and identifying weaknesses in systems you take for granted. We've discovered that your galactic economy has critical dependencies that even your own analysts have overlooked. The chamber erupted in alarmed conversations. Council security officers moved closer to the human section, uncertain if this constituted a threat. We call these network leverage points, crucial intersections in trade, communication, and resource management where small disruptions could cause cascading effects throughout galactic systems. President Wright's tone remained calm, almost conversational. For example, we've identified that your current fuel distribution network for military vessels has a 63% dependency on an outdated scheduling algorithm. A minor adjustment to this system could significantly impair fleet mobility across 17 sectors. The Vraxis military delegates visibly tensed. This was classified information that should not have been accessible to humans, let alone analyzed so thoroughly. Your emergency communication relays contain backdoor access points that date back to their original programming. We've mapped 82% of these vulnerabilities. With each example, the chamber grew more silent. President Wright wasn't making threats, in the traditional sense. She was simply stating facts that no provisional species should have been able to compile. We don't want war, she assured them. We have no desire for conflict of any kind. What we want is reform. We want justice for Jack Miller not through vengeance but through meaningful change. The hologram shifted to display a detailed document. We propose the Miller Protocols, a comprehensive framework for integrating new species into the Council. These protocols respect biological diversity and prevent tragedies like Jack's death from recurring. The document contained detailed recommendations. Medical databases for all member species would be freely shared to prevent dangerous biological incompatibilities. Safety measures would be designed for the most vulnerable, not the strongest. And most importantly, new species would be integrated based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical subordination. We submit these protocols for your immediate consideration, President Wright concluded. Our representatives throughout Council space await your response. The hologram disappeared, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. High Counselor Tiva finally spoke. This will require careful review. We will adjourn and... She was interrupted by Karen Foster, who rose from the human section. This itself was a breach of protocol. Provisional species representatives were not permitted to address the full council without prior approval. We don't need an adjournment, Karen said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. We need a decision. Either the council begins implementing these protocols immediately, or Earth will demonstrate exactly how vulnerable your networks are. Bill Johnson stood beside her. We haven't acted on our discoveries because we genuinely want cooperation, not conflict. But make no mistake, we are prepared to protect ourselves and ensure respect for our species. The two humans stood calmly, surrounded by representatives of species far more technologically advanced, far more numerous, and far older than humanity. Yet something about their quiet confidence made even the most powerful delegates uncomfortable. Delegate Zorn of the Vraxis Empire finally broke the silence. This is outrageous. Are these humans threatening the council? Not threatening, Karen corrected. Negotiating. There's a difference. Tiva raised all four of her hands for silence. This is unprecedented. No provisional species has ever addressed the council in this manner. Perhaps that's exactly the problem, Bill replied. We're simply asking you to recognize that being new doesn't make us less worthy of respect. The council chambers erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. Humanity had identified vulnerabilities throughout galactic infrastructure that no one had noticed, or that they had deliberately ignored. They had created a form of leverage that wasn't based on military might but on understanding complex systems better than those who built them. Humans think differently, Karen said into the commotion. That's not a weakness, it's our greatest strength. As Council security moved toward the human representatives, a priority message flashed across all communication channels in the chamber. Throughout Council space, human representatives had simultaneously transmitted a simple statement to their local authorities. The Council's response will determine our next steps. The message wasn't a direct threat, but its meaning was clear. 500 humans, strategically placed throughout galactic society, were waiting for a signal. The Council faced a choice they had never encountered before: negotiate with a provisional species as equals, or discover exactly what humans were capable of when united in common purpose. The 6 months following the extraordinary Council session were tense. The Council initially attempted to isolate human representatives, removing them from sensitive positions. This effort failed almost immediately. Too many humans had formed strong relationships with individuals from countless species. Attempts to force humans out of their positions were met with unexpected resistance from the Council's own members. The human Susan helped resolve our territorial dispute, argued a Pelian delegate when ordered to dismiss her. Her removal would destabilize the agreement. Similar responses echoed across Council space. Humans had made themselves useful, even essential in ways no one had anticipated. More surprising was the reaction from ordinary citizens of various species. Many had come to know humans personally and found their direct, collaborative approach refreshing. When word spread of the Council's attempts to restrict human activities, protests erupted on 17 worlds. On the Vraxis homeworld, an unprecedented event took place. Ambassador Kreetal, who had struck the blow that killed Jack Miller, requested a formal meeting with Nancy Rodriguez, the human chef who had served on a Vraxis vessel. The meeting was broadcast throughout Vraxis territory. Kreetal performed the sacred ritual of honor debt, kneeling before Nancy with his ceremonial staff laid at her feet. "I did not understand human fragility," he said, his voice carrying the formal tones of Vraxis ritual. "But through you, I have learned that physical vulnerability does not mean weakness of spirit." Nancy's response, graciously accepting his apology while sharing a meal she had prepared with both Vraxis and Earth ingredients, captivated viewers across species boundaries. The image of them eating together, breaking Vraxis tradition by sharing food as equals, became a powerful symbol. 3 months into the standoff, the Vraxis Empire made a shocking announcement. They would formally support the adoption of the Miller Protocols. This declaration from one of the Council's most powerful and traditionally conservative members sent shockwaves through galactic politics. In explanation, the Vraxis High Command simply stated, "We have observed humans. They do not seek vengeance. They seek improvement. This is a warrior's wisdom we had forgotten." The endorsement triggered a cascade of support from other species. Many had been waiting for a major power to take the first step. Within weeks, 70% of Council members had voiced support for at least partial adoption of the protocols. Still, the Council leadership hesitated, concerned about setting a precedent of yielding to a provisional species. High Counselor Tiva called for additional review committees and extended deliberation periods, traditional tactics to delay decisions indefinitely. President Wright responded with calm persistence. Every 30 days she addressed the Council briefly, repeating the same message. "We await your decision. Our representatives remain in place." The unstated implication hung in the space between her words. The humans knew the vulnerabilities in Council systems and were prepared to use that knowledge if necessary. Yet no human representative ever took action against Council infrastructure. They continued their work, building relationships and suggesting improvements. This restraint, this refusal to act on their leverage unless forced, confused many Council species who expected either surrender or aggression. Karen Foster, still stationed at the fuel processing hub, received many questions from her alien colleagues. "Why don't your people act?" asked a junior Drell engineer. "You have identified weaknesses that could give you power." Karen smiled. "Using those vulnerabilities would harm millions across multiple species. That's not our goal. We want to fix these systems, not break them." The Council deadlock finally broke 6 months after Earth's ultimatum, but not because of political maneuvering. A Lurian science vessel experienced catastrophic system failure in deep space. The ship carried over 4,000 civilians, including families from 12 different species. Emergency signals reached nearby stations, but the standard Council rescue protocols would take too long. The vessel had less than 6 hours before life support failed completely. Bill Johnson, the human programmer at the communications relay station, received the distress call. Without authorization, he activated the emergency backdoor systems he had discovered months earlier. This allowed him to coordinate a response across sectors that would normally be unable to communicate directly. Will Cooper, the librarian who had become an expert in Council archives, identified an ancient emergency protocol that permitted cross-species fleet cooperation in dire circumstances. Using Bill's communication network, he transmitted the legal authorization to vessels from 5 different species near the failing Lurian ship. Greg Washington, using his construction knowledge, helped the rescue teams develop a rapid adaptation to their airlocks to make them compatible with the damaged Lurian vessel. The rescue succeeded. All 4,000 passengers were saved through the coordinated efforts of ships that would never normally work together, using protocols buried in ancient records, communicating through channels that officially didn't exist. When news of the rescue spread, The Council could no longer ignore the implications. Humans had demonstrated exactly what they had claimed. They understood Council systems better than the Council itself. They could use that knowledge at any time. But they chose to use it to save lives rather than for leverage. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council formally adopted the Miller Protocols. The vote wasn't even close. 85% of members voted in favor. The remaining 15% abstained. Not a single species voted against. Under the new protocols, all species would share biological data to prevent misunderstandings, like the one that led to Jack Miller's death. New species would be integrated with attention to their physiological needs, rather than expected to adapt to systems designed for others. Most revolutionary, the concept that all sentient life held inherent value beyond economic metrics was formally incorporated into Council law for the first time in its 50,000-year history. 3 years after Jack Miller's death, humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Earth's seat was permanently named the Miller Chair in honor of the diplomat whose death had triggered the peaceful revolution. The ceremony marking this occasion was watched by billions across Earth and throughout Council space. Susan Blake, the kindergarten teacher who had become one of the most respected human representatives, was chosen as Earth's first official Council delegate. In her acceptance speech, Susan kept her words simple, just as she had when teaching 5-year-olds in Nebraska. Jack Miller went to the stars to build bridges between worlds. His life was cut short, but his purpose lives on through all of us. We come not as conquerors but as connectors, not for power, but for progress. She looked around at the assembled delegates, making eye contact with species whose appearance would have terrified her just 3 years earlier. Now they were colleagues, some even friends. The stars belong to all of us. Together, she concluded. The death of one human had indeed shaken the galaxy, not through the force of Earth's vengeance but through the power of humanity's response. In choosing connection over conflict, Earth had changed the course of galactic history forever. As representatives from 1,000 worlds rose in standing ovation, a simple truth became clear. Humanity's greatest strength had never been its technology or its military might. It was the human capacity to see systems, build networks, and value life beyond calculation. The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would humanity.